We hear lots of news about climate activists these days. Some of them are weird.
How dare you!
Activists block roads and bridges, smear a cake on King Charles III's waxwork, and vandalize art masterpieces in galleries, like Van Gogh's sunflowers or Mona Lisa. They stick themselves to pavements and walls, and do many other odd stuff. And the recent action at Stonehenge got the whole of Britain in an uproar. But why? What are the drivers of such freaky behavior? Let's hack their brains and find it out. Climate activism grows from environmentalism, an ideology and the social movement supporting the environment and life on Earth. Its goals are noble: to preserve, restore and improve the environment. However, though the goals could be common, the methods to achieve them may differ. This is what divides environmentalism into multiple streams. Fortunately, most forms of climate activism are aligned with democratic and humanistic ideals. They are temperate and reasonable and use litigation, shareholder activism or public advocacy to reach their goals. But some streams are radical. The spectrum of this radicalism can be wide, from far right to far left. You may be surprised, but there is ecofascism ideology, which implies sacrificing human rights, devaluing people's lives to zero, and cruelly rallying the nation to protect the environment within a state's borders. Oppositely, green anarchism means absolute decentralization, but simultaneously denies technological progress and science, seeing them as a source of climate change and other environmental issues. They stand for returning to a wild state and a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, where famine and diseases will be natural human population regulators. Tyler Durden approves. Less aggressive radical movements, however, have a better relation with common sense. And that's just who we might see in the news recently. They are about nonviolent resistance, inspired by Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King's living examples. The most famous organizations of nonviolent radical activism are probably Extinction Rebellion or XR and Just Stop Oil. Both are UK-based. XR has a very sophisticated, diverse and thorough approach to activism, creating a wide horizontal self-managing network with multiple tasks and activities. The ideology of XR is reflected in their manifesto on the movement's website. They are targeting to achieve the active support of 3.5% of the British population, because they believe this is the share needed to make social changes and proven by science, as XR states. That's not true. No solid research and evidence verifies this theory, but a beautiful figure is essential. Another beautiful and fantastic goal is net zero emissions by 2025. So there are less than 6 months left. Are we there? This is unrealistic. I know that, you know that, and they know that. They set it not because it's a climate goal, but the focal point for people's mobilization and assembly to provide the widest inclusion and discussion. XR even has no strategy for carbon neutrality by 2025, so this is just a kind of PR component. XR's actions are mostly planned independently, without interruption from the movement's formal leaders or other departments. In doing so, members should consider the principles of the XR manifesto, including non-violent character and sharing their organization's vision. But sometimes this self-management goes out of control and excesses happen. The action in London on October 17, 2019 was a scandal. 2 XR members climbed on a train's roof on the Canning Town station during the rush hour and caused their schedule's disruption. The video of the furious commuters dragging the activists down and throwing cups at them went viral. The XR's managers even had to apologize and disown this action's idea, saying they didn't approve it and they didn't support it. Eventually, activists Mark Ovland and James Mee were sentenced to 12 months of community order. Another organization, Just Stop Oil, acts more controversially. They are louder and have more aggressive rhetoric. It is emphasized even on the website, which screams with its orange theme and filled with deliberately aggressive manifests. They are known for gallery performances and spraying orange paint on the office doors of different organizations. Harmless in galleries, outside, Just Stop Oil has been noticed vandalizing public property and transport, even planes. Such a shocking actionism grabs a lot of public attention, which may be seen from the movement's YouTube channel. Though Just Stop Oil has an approximately equal number of subscribers with XR, the number of views on their videos is 9 times bigger. They found a precise way of being famous, which seems to work well. Just Stop Oil stands against oil production in the UK. They say the UK government should completely ban all new oil investments and licenses. But same as zero emissions by 2025 for Extinction Rebellion, this is not attainable. And even if it happens just tomorrow, the UK holds only 0.8% of the global oil production by itself. It would be just a drop in the sea. There are also British transnational oil companies and oil-rich countries with greedy elites. They can find a lot in common, so new oil licenses will be easily achieved there. The goals of such activist behavior are multiple. The supreme one is utterly simple: to save our planet from extinction. It sounds stilted, but this is the primary driver for most activists. The second goal is to make a change. Liberal capitalism, in their view, doesn't manage humankind's needs. First of all, fighting climate change and coping with injustice. Activists require wider and more direct inclusion, and offer new forms of this inclusion, like exarch groups and activist communities. They reasonably say there is a barrier between governments and corporations on one side and people and the environment on the other. Behind this wall, people of power stay deaf to people's needs. The voices of radicals are louder, and their actions are much more visible to those behind the wall. They see themselves as the last resort, promising to break or at least crack the vicious wheel. And here, radicals are kinda cousins of populists. That's why most actions are aimed at politicians. Is it effective? Well, in the UK, the declaration of climate emergency can probably result from activist pressure. Moreover, a lot of major corporations have committed to divesting fossil fuels. Any act causes counteract. International companies with a vested interest in maintaining the status quo channel millions of dollars into fake news, whilst public figures and politicians undermine the youth that took a stand. For example, counter-terrorism police in England label XR's ideology as extremist. This is a similarly rational response from those who wish to preserve the status quo, especially when traditional activism has been the driver of so much social change. For instance, the civil rights movement in the US, the fight for universal suffrage, and changes to equality laws and policies across many countries. The bureaucracy in the West is slow and heavy in dealing with climate emergencies. That's why it has to be kicked constantly. However, Western governments are mostly open to feedback compared to emerging economies, where rulers are often bogged down in corruption and eager for control over people and local elites. It's a tougher challenge to make them act, as the police state may easily suppress protests and civil activism, and the activists themselves may be labeled illegal or even murdered. It explains why climate activism's presence is wider in the West, as protesters feel much freer there. The third goal is grabbing the public attention to climate. The last actions of Just Stop Oil in galleries in London and Paris attracted wide media coverage. They were perceived very controversially, though the paintings were not damaged. Activists shouted that climate is more important than art. These performances were made to be heard by politicians, but even more importantly, to confront people's indifference. I said earlier that there is a barrier between those in power and the people. However, there is a barrier between the people and the environment either. Many of us think climate issues are boring and unnecessary and don't touch us personally. Radicals try to break this another barrier by pushing the debate on the street and increasing publicity in this way. They are positioned as the voice of future generations who will have to live in our planet and suffer the most from the wrong decisions of their ancestors. These acts firstly touch the public's emotions, while the rational component is only secondary. In the emotional spectrum, they strive to ignite negative feelings like anger, fear or sadness, showing doom and gloom pictures of pollution, extinction or hunger. The number of positive messages is notably fewer, and they focus on causing hope. Yes, this is a manipulation. But tell me, can you convince millions with only rational arguments? You may try, but will rather fail, as counter-arguments will be found, even the craziest. In this point, reaching out to the audience is an even harder challenge than being heard by politicians. Humans are creatures of habit, deeply invested in the taken for granted routines, behavioral norms and established worldviews that structure our lives. Emergent collective action almost always requires people to depart from their comfort zone, from a personal bubble, and encounter the real world. We tend to resist doing so, even when the issue is in our objective interest. Even the most desperate cases of climate protest may not sink into people's souls. On April 24, 2022 in Washington, Wynne Bruce, a climate activist, burned himself right near the Supreme Court building. Does someone remember him today? The man sacrificed his life to be heard, but such a loud act faded away from the public discourse. He had never been a member of any climate movement. That was his independent action. But he was forgotten, though he deserved to be a legend, firstly for other activists. And now, when you see how hard it is to reach people's attention, can you still say pouring a soup on a picture is not a flashy idea? Nonetheless, the brightest performances of XR seem to be done already. We can hear news about them fewer and fewer. The latest was about spraying yachts with black paint in Spain. not as hot and fresh as 5 years ago. Does it mean the peak of XR and climate activism itself has passed? The same is relevant for Just Stop Oil either. The performances in the galleries were impressive. However, each new protest is similar to the previous one, which devalues the actionism, as people perceive it as more and more ordinary, paying less attention. The only way further is to escalate, but the escalation is limited by non-violent principles. Moreover, in doing so, climate activists will alienate themselves from their audience. But people want simple and easy-picking ideas instead, and don't want to bother themselves with reflections. It's sad, but it's true. And of course, it can't help to convince skeptics of the climate crisis. They are just getting additional arguments, pointing at weird youngsters and saying, look, only mad and mentally ill people like that can talk about climate change. And we should know that there are a lot of deniers among conservative politicians who provide interest of irresponsible business as usual. In this way, such performances rather hinder the green transition in minds. The same is true for oil companies as well. Seeing how desperately climate activists are trying to be heard, and how their behavior disconnects the society and climate agenda, the oil tycoons are contentedly rubbing their hands, assured their business will be demanded for longer. No, climate activism is not in a crisis. Oppositely, it has as many opportunities as never before. However, their approach has to be reconsidered in favor of common sense. We will not stop oil right now, in a moment. We have to admit it, even if it's bitter true. Let's just be realistic. Immediate refusal of oil will throw us back for decades, and our quality of life will fall sharply. But we need to do everything to accelerate the transition, moving away from fossil fuels as fast as possible. It is done from everyone's actions, as each one of us is responsible for the planet's future. We need to constantly point out how celebrities use business jets for individual flights, or how forests are cut down for new oil wells to be drilled. There is always a space for both climate actions and enjoying arts in our lives, and they are not replaceable. They are both important. Both an eagerness for change and the feeling of beauty make us humans. We all have to make out that radicalism is never a good decision. It's also a hard way to win a majority of people over. That's true, lots of people are indifferent about climate change unless it doesn't affect them directly. However, climate change deniers are steadily getting marginals. Particularly in the UK, they are less than 5%. It's still too little to stop rising temperatures. But no transition is a road with roses. There will always be resistance and aggression in this path. But no matter how hard the right way is, it shouldn't be passed with anger and leaving the destruction behind. But the conclusion here is that we do need organizations like XR and Just Stop Oil. The presence of activists, even radicals, is a sign of healthy society and institutions, as no activist organization may emerge without social demand, proper entities and mobilization. They galvanize people for action, to make changes. They shake the core of a political system and society, making them react and making them reflect. Remember, Greenpeace activists did radical things in the past, but now Greenpeace fits our everyday life naturally. A healthy system can digest any radicalism, cooked in useful things it may offer. This is what is called progress. Yes, activists can be weird and can do crazy things. They can make a lot of mistakes, just like all humans. But as Martin Luther King said, human beings, with all their faults and strengths, constitute the mechanism of a social movement. They must make mistakes and learn from them, make more mistakes and learn anew. Thank you for watching this video. Good luck and be sustainable.